So I never gave much thought to that word disability until a little over a year ago when I crashed headfirst into that dreaded disabilities wall. And it started one morning when I woke up and realized that I could no longer make out the words on my computer screen. And the thing is, I had been fighting tooth and nail to hold on to my eyesight for the past 15 years. Ever since walking into an eye doctor's office and being told that I was going blind from this devastating degenerative eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. And it's a doozy. It first knocks out your night vision, and then your peripheral vision just closes in on you, and then it stills the rest. And, I'd been hanging on by a thread for a while, but up until a few months prior to that date, I still could see fairly clearly through my central vision. My eyesight had closed in, so I was seeing through a small hole, but most of that central vision was intact until a few months before, and I started losing my color vision, and everything took on this greenish gray hue, kind of like the aftermath of a nuclear holocaust. And then I'd say a couple months later, I noticed that my central vision, that one thing I had left, was becoming fuzzy. And then my light perception started to dim, and I needed more light to see in the daylight. But everything came crashing into that screeching halt that day that I realized that no matter how powerful my reading glasses were, I could not make out the words on my computer screen. And the thing is, I was just wrapping up a book project for a client, and I thought, holy crap, how am I going to finish this book? And then everything, and everything started to spiral. I think it was the next day, I remember going outside and looking down the block, and I could not see the end of the block. That green-gray hue had turned into such a thick green-gray dense fog that I couldn't see more than a foot in front of me. And then I think it was the next day that I looked in the mirror and I realized that I could no longer make out my face. And then, right around that same time, it hit me that I could no longer make out the faces of the three people I love the most, my husband, John, and our two daughters, Sydney and Hannah. And I can tell you, it was devastating. I was so crushed, it was hard to breathe. But then I realized it wasn't just my family's faces that I couldn't see. I couldn't see any other thing in the world. Suddenly I could no longer see mountains or sunsets or the beach or the ocean or flowers or the artwork hanging up in my house. It was just all gone. And wow, I think I spent 2 weeks huddled in a ball in the corner of my living room, just wallowing in so much grief and loss and despair. I wasn't sure how I could go on. And then terror started gripping me. And I thought, how am I going to move forward with my life? How am I going to maintain my independence and, my identity? And I would say I was there for a good 2 weeks before, like anyone struggling with hard adversity, because I know we all deal with hard challenges in our lives. I realized that I had a choice. I could stay flattened and let this eyesight thing destroy me, or I could stand back up and keep on going with my life. And when I finally made that decision, I looked at this eyesight loss as just another challenge that had been thrown my way. Albeit a hard one, but I just considered it this big fat obstacle, this hurdle in my path that I had to figure my way over or around, if necessary, underneath, so I could get to the other side and reclaim my power. And I thought, okay, first thing I've got to do is get assistive technology training so I can get back to work. Because the thing is, writing isn't just my job, it's my passion and it's what feeds my soul. But on top of that, eyesight or no eyesight, I still needed to generate an income. I still needed to help support my family. And it also just, comes down to a basic sense of self-worth. So I sucked it up, because I hate asking for help, but I sucked it up and I placed a phone call to this state agency who helps people who have lost their eyesight. But when I explained my circumstances, the guy just said, I'm sorry, we are under an indefinite budget freeze and I don't know when we'll be able to help you. And man, I was desperate. I desperately needed this training. So I asked for other resources, and he said, well, I mean, there is this nonprofit organization that also works with people who are visually impaired, and maybe they can help you. So I hung up and I called and I left what I thought was a really, really clear message. But when the man called me back 2 hours later, it was obvious something had shifted. He talked in a really loud, really slow voice, as though now I had also lost my hearing and my ability to comprehend. I mean, like my IQ had plummeted. And he said, I mean, I don't know why they would have you call me. I mean, we're not in the business to help people who are working. He said, but I tell you what, you live in Ballard, right? And Ballard's this neighborhood in Northwest Seattle. And I said, yes, I do. And he said, well, I mean, there's a senior center there with a vision loss support group, and I recommend you join that. And, I just had to take a deep breath and explain that no, thank you. I mean, not only am I not a senior citizen just yet, but I mean, I'm not interested in a vision loss support group. I told him what I needed was assistive technology training so I could get back to work. So now it's his turn to take a deep breath, and then talking in this condescending tone, like I was a 5-year-old who needed to be schooled on my new reality, he said, I really recommend that you join that vision loss support group at that senior center, because you're now going to experience a lot of stigma and social isolation. And I can tell you, I was stunned. I mean, I felt like he'd just dumped this truckload of wet cement on me. I thought, wow, I mean, are you kidding me? It's not enough that I am grieving the loss of my eyesight. It is not enough that I cannot see my family's faces or my own face in the mirror. I mean, it's not enough that I have to relearn every facet of my life if I want to reclaim my power in my life. You're telling me that because I had the gall to lose my eyesight, I should just now expect to be publicly shunned. I mean, I was floored, and then I was outraged. I mean, I hung up that phone, and as I processed his words, I thought, this is so messed up. I mean, why as a society would we shun and isolate people who have been through hardcore adversity? I mean, why would we do that? And then I thought, I mean, we've all struggled with something hard in our life. We all face hard challenges. I mean, we all do. So why is it that some of those challenges we rally around and we throw love and support, and others, like, they're taboo and we think that it's okay to like shun and isolate and like channel these really harmful attitudes their way, when I can tell you, like, it hurts bad enough, trust me, to be in this position. I mean, you don't need that extra layer of loss added on top of it, and being shunned and isolated. And I mean, I thought, what's the difference? And I will give you an example. 4 years ago, I was diagnosed out of the blue with this aggressive form of breast cancer. And really immediately, I had to undergo this hardcore chemotherapy. And I can tell you, I mean, I was disabled in every sense of the word after those chemotherapy rounds. I mean, I was so sick that I couldn't even lift my head off the pillow. But people weren't shunning me and isolating me for it. I mean, they were bringing me casseroles and, calling me and offering me so much love and encouragement and support and cheering me on big time. And again, like, I just have kept asking myself, I mean, what is the difference? What is the difference between that and a hard challenge, whether it's a learning challenge or a developmental challenge or a hard physical challenge that has been shoved under that disabilities label? What's the difference? And, the more I started thinking about it and thinking about why we do this, I mean, I know it's not maliciousness. I think it is just this huge kind of ingrained bias. Somehow we just put down this line and we don't see across that line. And I thought, well, I mean, the only way we're going to change this, the only way is, one, if we really look at our own stories of struggles and recognize that we all struggle with something hard. but two, to really examine the definitions we have for that word disability. And more than that, our views and perceptions and attitudes that we hurl toward people struggling with those hard challenges that fall under that disabilities label. Because the thing about it is, I mean, when I think about that word as it relates to people, you know, who have been through this hard adversity in their lives, the only word that comes to my mind is resilience. I mean, think about it. If you're flattened with something so hard, but you're able to stand back up and keep going despite it, if you refuse to let that hurdle stay in your way, if you figure your way over it or around it or underneath it so you can get to the other side, isn't that hardcore resilience and depth and strength? I mean, isn't that what we're aspiring to or should aspire to as a society? Isn't that what we want in our workforce and in positions of leadership? I mean, I have been hearing this word, or rather this buzzword, emotional intelligence, being batted around different businesses and organizations, with the idea being that if you bring empathy and understanding into the workforce, and if you treat employees as whole beings, productivity and health and happiness all is on the rise. I mean, it helps in every facet. And who better to bring that emotional intelligence than someone who has been dealt this hardcore adversity but is able to keep on going anyway. So that's how I look at it. But if I define that word disability in the really kind of limiting negative sense that so many people conjure when they think of that word, the only definition that comes to mind for me is fear. And fear is a disability that we all struggle with. I mean, we all have that fear disability, and think about how crippling it is. Think about how much it flattens us and keeps us from going after what we want. And in this polarized society that we live in, think about how fear is separating and dividing us and is causing so much needless pain and harm. I mean, think about that. But also imagine, I mean, if we could strip fear of its power, if we could overcome that fear disability. I mean, the thing is that the opposite of fear is love. And what if we could just, again, look at our own challenges? What if we could look inward and realize that we all struggle with something hard and that we all need a helping hand along the way? What if we could, instead of looking at people and seeing their challenges, we see them at their core for who they are? Because the thing is, I can tell you, I mean, we all at the core are the same. We all have the same hopes and dreams and aspirations. I mean, we all want that in our lives. So my challenge, I guess, to everyone, again, is to really, really come together instead of separating and divided based on our differences. What if we just all love each other and help one another and come together and unite? I mean, imagine if we do that. What an incredible world we could create.